We'll do a roll call then.
Good morning. I'll read the roll. Please let us know if you're here. Commissioner Carl Baxmeyer.
Here.
Councilman Jesse Bohannon. Said he might join virtually. I don't see him. Commissioner Mike Burrows. Here. District Deputy Commissioner Deitchley. Councilman Dwight Fish. Councilman Doug Graham. Commissioner Carrie Groninger. Here. Councilwoman Kathy Groninger.
Here.
Councilwoman Lori Hammond. Councilman Greg Hicksonbaugh.
Here.
Mayor Phil Jenkins.
Here.
District Deputy Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gina Lick.
Here.
Mayor James Mueller. Oh, great, Mayor. I got you. I didn't recognize the number, so we've got you now. All right, Mayor James Mueller, Mayor Rod Robertson, Councilman Mark Root, Mayor Mark Center could not attend today, Mayor Joseph Talmer, here, Commissioner Susie Wyrick,
Present.
and Mayor David Wood.
Here.
We have a quorum of members present. We will only be voting in person though today.
Great. Okay, as far as reports, Chairman, I don't know if there's anything new to report from a chairman perspective. Look for, I guess we got the minutes we need to approve first. So back to the minutes there. I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from August 9th. Are there any questions there?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Then next on our agenda, reports. Chairman, as far as I know, there's nothing new to report for me. Then rolling down into the financial report from Debbie. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. So this will be the first month in our new fiscal year. So through the end of July, our fiscal year to date expenses are $615,438.01, which is 5% of our annual budget. Our cash balance at the end of July was $2,432,014.71. And our cash disbursements for the month of July was $678,490.47. Are there any questions about the July financial report? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for the board's approval of the July 2023 financial report.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Next is our secretary report. Bill?
You have in your packet the August administrative modifications.
Great. No action really needed there, just
Information.
on it. So, thank you. Old business. It's like, James, we got anything in old business?
We have no old business today,
Okay.
only new business.
So I'm gonna roll right into the new business then. So new business today, James, what do we got?
Yeah, we have a few, one minor resolution for the Transportation Improvement Program that Caitlin's going to present. I do want to let everyone know that the state's Transportation Improvement Program, as you'll recall, we were transitioning from one document to the next. The state's program was approved on September 1st. So we are transitioning fully. I mean, we approved ours back in May, so it's been a few months, but the states have now approved, and so we'll really transition to that 24 to 28 only. We might have to do some minor cleanup. We did do some conversations with the state to advocate for a more smooth and streamlined process for kind of our regions that already have improvement programs. So we're not directly listed in the STIP. There's been a lot of challenges with the STIP over the last 2 years, but we're in there by reference, which is just referring to our document. So there might be some new back-end procedures, but ultimately what it should improve is your projects being listed in the STIP in a quicker manner. There's been challenges over the last few years, but we'll let you know any big changes as that kind of unwinds, but we are excited that the state has an approved STIP, but we'll turn it over to Caitlin to present 2723.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah, we have Transportation Resolution 27-23, which is NDOT initiated. This is changing the scope for the US 6 bridge at CSX Railroad. Typically, we process bridge deck overlays as a modification, but this was originally included in our Transportation Improvement Program as a replace superstructure. So it's kind of being downgraded in scope, which is why we're processing it as a unit. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or otherwise I would ask for your approval of resolution 27-23.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay, other action, resolution 2823, talking about the urban trolley.
Yeah.
Zach? Good
So
morning.
I've got a kind of a procedural item for you today for the interurban trolley. About every 3 years, we have a update to our Title VI plan for the interurban trolley. So in this document, which you have here before you, basically says that we're following the federal guidelines for non-discrimination in the interurban trolley. Particularly, it does outline our complaint procedures or how to resolve those issues that might come up and arise there. And we also address the limited English proficiency requirement that we also have. So translating our materials into Spanish is a requirement for that. So we have our brochures for the routes are all in Spanish. Our Title VI information also in Spanish. Make sure that everyone can know their rights on the interurban trolley. So we're asking for you to approve this plan so we can submit this over to FTA for their records.
I mean, you all as local governments have familiarity with Title VI, especially with, say, NDOT program where you have to submit updated Title VI and ADA plans. This is very similar for MACOG in the delivery of the federal program for the transit service. So essentially what we're doing is just making sure that that plan is current and that we don't lapse on that so that we're able to continue to provide that service. So really not any substantive changes, but making sure that kind of our procedures are known, but also on the limited English proficiency, making sure that we've gone through that analysis to kind of show what are those languages that we should be translating into, et cetera. No major substantive, real big changes on the plan or policy front, but just making sure that it stays current.
Great. With that, we're ready for a motion.
Yeah.
So moved. Second.
So we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
And I wanted to point out too, it's come up with one or local government as your plans for Title VI or ADA come up when you're thinking about your eligibility to apply for NDOT programs. If you need any help with that, sometimes you get that letter that says, hey, you're about to lapse. If you need assistance with that, please reach out. We're always happy to help put together those plans with you. And so if you do need any help, if that ever poses a challenge, we try to stay current with everybody. But, if you do ever need that help, please always feel free to reach out and let us know as we have familiarity to what really NDOT wants to see. I know this is more for FTA, but thought it was a good point of emphasis as it's come up recently in other conversations.
Great. Always good to we have that resource. Okay, the next resolution is resolution 2923. James, county
Yeah.
membership assessment.
Yeah, so this is a conversation that we've had kind of off again, on again over the last 2 years. Just to give some context to kind of our assessment, the way that it works is that the counties pay that membership. And the assessment is calculated based on census population and then multiplied by a cents per capita, if you will. So over the years, that has changed, but it has been 35 cents on population since 2002, which has been, by rough calculations, 20-ish years. I'm not always the best at math, but I think I've got that one. the purchasing power of $1 since 2000 is very different. And so that was the last time that rate had changed. Before that, we have records that we're easily able to find through our stuff back to the 80s. But in 1999, it was 30 cents. It moved to 30 cents. 2002, it moved to 35 cents. 98, it was 20 cents. So 98 to 99, it jumped 10 cents. And then 2001 to 2002, it jumped another 5 cents. And back in 91, it jumped from 15 cents to 20 cents. So obviously there's a numerator and denominator here. And so the big number, population, that changes every 10 years, but that rate has not changed in 20 years. We had talked to each of the counties, the commissioners, council members about changing that rate to 50 cents on population. And this might be premature. We might want to table it and kind of wait until we see where all county budgets end up. But in the initial conversations with all of our counties, it seemed as though the request to make that increase was so far successful in the early parts of those budget processes. And so the last time that this rate changed, we did enact kind of a resolution at the board level back in 2000 or 2001. And so we were looking to pass a resolution to make that membership assessment rate change of 50 cents on population more official. Happy to answer any questions. And we just felt like it was the appropriate action of the board. I had some conversations with the counties over the last year and a half. Seemed like for calendar 24 that this, obviously the budget process is still midstream. So I don't want to say is successful, but it seems that everything was trending in that this request was going to be accommodated. So
I know for Elkhart County specifically, we talked about it and then we conveniently forgot to put it in the budget the first time. And at the same time that we can absorb the rate. So I know we're still ready to move forward with it. Do you want to wait until all budgets are passed, or do you just want to wait and prove the concept today?
It's honestly, the approach is 6 of one, half dozen of another for us. We've already sent those requests into all of the counties. The counties are going through the budget process. Last month when I checked in on things, everything was seeming to trend in a positive direction. If we would prefer to table and wait until November when budgets are adopted, I'm completely fine with that as well. I just wanted to make sure that it was also recorded in the official resolution so that in 3 years from now, when someone says, well, where'd the rate come from, that we have a resolution that says where, that is a board action, if you will.
I know our commissioner's budget stayed intact last night. So, I mean, we're not the final approval, but I know it was in there. But I think, your organization continues to add value to our community. And I know when I presented it to the council, that was something that they were very supportive of. So, I mean, although we don't have formal final approval, I know Kosciuszko County's definitely in for what we need to do to be able to support you guys properly from a funding source. So I don't know about the Marshall or St. Joe, but
Same is true with Marshall County.
And St. Joe, Mark just confirmed that it is in the budget.
okay.
So I'd make a motion to approve resolution 29-23.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And James, thanks you for your hard work on that. I know it's one of those things when you ask for a big increase, everybody kind of gets a big lump in their throat, but
Yeah.
it's long overdue. So
It is.
we
But we
what your
appreciate,
staff does.
yeah, we really appreciate, the work that MACOG does is largely able to be done because of the investment that local government makes and the choice that local government makes to continue to participate and see the value in what MACOG is working on. And so I know it was a larger request, but we really do appreciate folks being able to make that consideration and move that forward. It will mean that the great thing about your investment is that then it is leveraged. So for every $2 we get, from local funds, we're able to then turn that into an additional $8 in federal investments. And so it does make the overall budget of the organization go a lot further. And so we appreciate the investment that you all choose to make.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda this morning is EPA Brownfield Grant. Leah?
Good morning.
Morning.
Some of you are very familiar with our Brownfields program. Others are newer to MACOG, so I'm going to give an update and a reminder of how our Brownfields program has been functioning in our organization since 2018. And scattered throughout here are some highlights, some pictures, and you'll find more information. For example, Arnold is the site that we've spent the most funding on. We're really excited about that project moving forward into an affordable housing project. You'll find site-specific updates throughout with pictures and details on exactly how much money was spent on which site. This presentation. Also, feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go, or I can take questions at the end. So our Regional Brownfields Coalition is structured with each of our counties as members, signing a resolution to join with MACOG as a lead applicant for our Brownfield grants. It includes all 4 counties, and we've been doing this work since 2018. So far, we've received 2 grants. Our $600,000 grant, that's what this report scattered throughout the table here. This is pertaining to our first grant, which just closed out in the beginning of this year, where we spent all that funding. We also received a second grant for $500,000 that we started using within the last year. And we're going to be pretty close to investing all of those funds because the need is fairly great. So we do anticipate reapplying shortly for additional funding, hopefully over $1 million this next round. This is an example of another site that we assisted. This is Portage Place, formerly Ward Bakery Building in South Bend, and the St. Joseph County Commissioners were really instrumental in getting access to this property. It was owned by a guy who lives in Florida who considered this property to be abandoned by himself and wouldn't provide us that access. And so the commissioners were really important for using some state statutes to be able to get us into the building to do the assessments so another developer could take it over and improve it. Our Brownfields projects team is structured with a consultant, Metric Environmental, with their sub-consultants, Roberts Environmental and Revitalized Communities, that perform our environmental site assessments and the technical work that we provide. Here's just an example of some drilling that happened recently in South Bend at the South Bend Range site. We did some sampling there. And then we're also supported by a regional brownfields working group that meets most months, I would say, for the last several years, less frequently when we are not as busy. But that is comprised entirely of local government staff from most cities and all counties that make decisions on how do we prioritize sites that come in and spend our funding to the best interest of the region. This is an example of a site in Plymouth where the vacant lot was turned into a Habitat for Humanity house, a single-family home, and this was one of the few sites in Marshall County, but we were really excited with the outcome of this. It took a long time with housing prices to get that built. I'll go over a little bit more about our fiscal year 2019 report. That's just the first year that we applied for that grant, but it did cover the last 3 years. Spending by county, the majority of it went to Elkhart County, with Kosciuszko County second, close to a third of the funding. The reason you see that it looks disproportionate with St. Joseph County by population or Marshall County, but the reason for that is that both St. Joseph County and Marshall County received their own $600,000 coalition grants around between 2014 and 2017. And so they had spent a large portion of money, but the other 2 counties had not recently received any large assessment grants. So that's why you see that looking out of balance there. But the needs we've seen have continued to grow as developers and local governments have learned about the grant funding that we have available. The sites that we spent money on, you'll see listed here, most of them in Elkhart and Kosciuszko counties, but sites in all 4 counties as required by our grant. We did end up spending about 70% of our funding directly on the deliverables that we are supposed to fund. Those would be phase 1 environmental site assessments. Those are just reports that are necessary when you're transferring property to make sure that you reduce your liability risk. You have a defense that you didn't cause or create the contamination, and you'll continue to take continuing steps to prevent any releases. And then phase 2s, those are just sampling and further site investigations. We can do tank removals, We did a tank removal in Elkhart. We're preparing to do a tank removal in the town of Syracuse. That's the only quasi cleanup action we can take because the justification is we need to sample underneath the tank's in the way, we're allowed to take it out, and once the tank's out, then we can close it and move it. So you can think of that as a cleanup action, but other than that, our funding is all for sampling, outreach, and then planning for cleanup and planning for reuse, but not cleanup itself. This is 1701 Sterling in Elkhart. I know that the neighbors are very glad that that building recently came down in the last year. One time we led a tour to that building and it was on fire, so it was definitely a nuisance for many, many years. Now it's down and there are plans for that to be turned into housing in the next few years if we can secure some incentives from the state. We did hold a number of public meetings in Elkhart. This is an example of a CGCon public meeting where we created some conceptual reuse designs and we're able to use our funding for that type of deliverable from a design firm. We also made sure to deliver postcards because we started this work at the height of the pandemic in 2020 and all of our outreach had to be virtual. So it was really important to us, instead of relying on people to find us online, to actually deliver things in people's mailboxes in the areas where we were going to be working. That is no longer appears to be frozen.
No. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Just took a second.
All right. Is that the appropriate slide?
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm moving on to our current grant that we've been working on for about the last year. And here's an example of the sites that we're already assisting with. I've underlined those that we helped start in the last grant and are continuing to move forward. It's really important to us when we start something to see it through to its eventual redevelopment and reuse. Some new sites in Elkhart, for example, the Roundhouse over by the Tolson Center, in addition to 6th in Indiana. In Goshen, we're assisted with the Western Rubber site, which is going to become the Aerial Cycle Works apartment building. Kosciuszko County, we just recently got sampling results back from the Owen Supermarket in Warsaw to help with that housing project. And then I mentioned earlier the Syracuse future site of the new Syracuse library that the town will be donating. We needed to make sure that tanks are out of the ground and that site's clean for that. Marshall County, there's a site in Plymouth right downtown where there's an old building that needs to be demolished for housing. And St. Joseph County, we've been assisting with the Diamond View Apartments, which will be right across from Ball Field. Affordable housing, Oil Express, and South Bend Range, where there's a lot of neighborhood interest in a fairly complex area that we've been helping with funding that the city didn't have to put forth for sampling there. And this is just another example of the South Bend Range building. Here's the Syracuse Public Library. It's now just a nice field, but the town, the way it sits by the lakes, is fairly constrained with the places that they can put a new library, and so they're looking at this site, and we're just helping to do the due diligence to make sure it's being redeveloped appropriately. This is the Western Rubber Aerial Cycle Works. You can see from the original Western Rubber building, the new design is kind of a throwback to what was originally there. It's currently just a vacant lot, and it was cleaned up and sampled a decade ago by the city, but not all the way up to residential standards. There's actually a environmental restrictive covenant against residential. So that was a problem when a developer came in for residential. I think they were thinking maybe originally commercial and industrial reuse, but now the housing need kind of predominates what the city wanted to see.
Gina, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
So is this out of litigation, or we just this a quick yes, no, I don't mean, I'm just curious. I've heard, are we moving forward with this, or do we need something else?
I'll need to check on the exact status of that, I'm not sure at that point. So I'll get an answer back to you as quickly as I can.
Thanks, Gina. Sorry.
Let us know if you
Okay.
get sampling.
Okay. All right. Bye.
This is the site in Plymouth, located, there's a green pin there, it's in walking distance to the park, and there's been a lot of exciting things happening in downtown Plymouth, and so we're excited to see this hopefully turn into some future new housing in the downtown area. We just finished sampling there last month, and a snapshot of a possible redesign. I don't know if this is the latest version, but this is what was recently presented for the redevelopment there, and the supermarket that was torn down South Bend Range. This is probably the more complicated site that we've worked on under this current grant. It's very similar to Arnold, where the EPA was already came in and removed some drums and chemicals from the site, and now we're assisting with that subsurface sampling to see are there broader impacts, soil, groundwater, that we would have to remediate. Currently, this is not owned by the city, just like Arnold, it was not owned by the city, and so we're assisting with the process of transferring that over to the city so that there's more site control for a better outcome here. And we are currently at about 70% spend of this grant just within our first year. The need is very great, and we've been turning away sites that needed funding. But we hope that by reapplying for an additional $1 million to $1.5 million in this next funding cycle, we'll be poised to help with the next set of sites that need our assistance. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
It's a great program. I know there's those sites that are always just tough to get that initial money to get the phase done, especially if the community doesn't own the property. It's really tough to get it off center. So appreciate the hard work and efforts that go into that. So.
Likewise, same thing, come alongside city, especially on that Arnold site when we had a spill, and the EPA came in and it got real hot real quick, and you guys are right there, and gosh, we got building it up now. So they'll be moving in early next year.
When you think of other sites, our site of interest form, you can direct people to our website, macog.com/brownfields.html. This site of interest form is how it's sort of the intake process to get it to our regional brownfields working group, make sure it's eligible, and then go from there.
Liam, maybe I missed it, but this was a $600,000 grant. Is that on a 3-year cycle or a 5-year cycle?
It's a 3-year cycle.
Okay.
We spent most of our funding the first time with the $600,000. We spent most of it within 2 years, and then had to sort of slow our roll a bit. But this year we spent 70% of funding in the first year, and so we'll reapply now. Hope by the time we spend the next 30%, we'll have more funding next fall. We may have to try a couple years in a row, but the need is definitely there. So we're just spending it at the pace of the need.
Yeah, EPA's program for the assessment grants and the coalition grants, it's an annual program, but when you're awarded funds, you have up to 3 years to spend them. So that 600,000, we weren't sure how quick or how slow it would go. It was the max award at the time, but based on the rules at the time, we thought we were going to actually be able to reapply in year 2, and we were really close. But they changed the date to, usually it's you need to be 75% spent, and it used to be January, and we were there in January, but they changed it that year to when your application was filed, which was October, and we were at 69%, so we couldn't apply. So yep, I mean, tis what happens, right? And it makes sense, because when you're submitting, you should know, right? I think they got burned too many times on folks that didn't quite make it, and so it made sense. But then the next cycle, where we were able to apply, that got a little challenging too, because there was this rollout of this very large regional coalition where they were really going to get behind coalitions like ours, big regional coalitions, and increase the award. And it was perfect for us. We were really excited about it. But then EPA got some pushback on, well, what is a region, and all sorts of questions. And so then they got rid of the coalition completely. But we were able to work with EPA, and we worked some magic.
Well, we just said our community is our region. So
and we applied for the community grant and the community of MACOG. And the EPA was fine with that. And we were able to get a $500,000 award. So it was a little bit smaller, but it was very comparable. But now the coalition grants are back, and they are supporting regions. And it is a little bit of a larger award. You have a little bit more time.
4 years up to 1.5 million.
Yeah. So
is that max award based upon the population in that coalition?
Based on what we asked for, we certainly have the need, and we do a good job spending money. Region 5 likes us for that. So
technically, any coalition could apply for that. It's just the max award for any coalition. So
Just careful when you say do a good job spending money or taxpayers.
Well, but what I would say is that,
You're gonna take it, Sven.
what I would say is that we're able to spend it and we're not just spending it on a bunch of phase ones, right? Like, we realize that the assessment funds are not the only part to get a property back into reuse. But that the properties that we have been able to work with, that we're making sure that the communities are very serious about those properties and that there is a strong development opportunity. And whether it's, singular lot or smaller lot that ends up with a habitat house on it, or whether it's a larger property that ends up with affordable housing on it, we have had those kind of properties develop that have structures on them now that they're getting back into reuse, back on those tax rolls. And so not only is it spending, but it's also then creating action that is very positive overall for the communities, whether it's leading to the demo of just a delinquent property that then sets it up for redevelopment, or actually all the way through to redevelopment. We realize our funds don't facilitate all of that action, right? It's a small mix of the overall portfolio, but there is a great demand for very legitimate projects that need development and need this as kind of that kind of initial barrier to why they aren't being redeveloped.
Yeah, I mean, the developer isn't going to take that risk on. He knows what he's really getting himself into. So, I mean, those phase one, phase twos are just crucial to be able to get a developer to commit to a property, not knowing how big of a gorilla he's got to take down. So,
with some of these grants, it's just scattershot. The money's spent on assessments, and then nothing happens with most of the sites. They just sit there for another decade. We've been fairly successful in turning our assessments into actual projects, like the Arnold site, for example, and then supporting that with, if the staff doesn't have the capacity or the technical knowledge to write a cleanup application or whatever needs to happen, we'll help support and write that and get that in for them so that they can secure the cleanup funding. So we don't just stop at assessment.
how is the funding for the cleanup portion? I mean, what success have we had there?
We've had success in getting a $4 million financing through EPA's revolving loan fund program for the city of Elkhart. We've helped get the $500,000 for Arnold. We've helped get smaller. Sometimes we just send sites directly to, for example, the Petroleum Orphan Site Initiative. So there's that gas station
Right,
right by the
15.
lake. Yeah, on 15. We just said, don't use our money, use the state's money, because they'll assess it and clean it up. So we'll help write the application for that. So there's a lot of different programs, big and small. We try to we can expand the pool and not use our funding and take other funding sources. We'll just send sites directly to cleanup sources.
And that's like the South Bend Range site, which has been a big
And
focus this time.
EPA removal funding, that's where it's not a competitive cleanup grant, but if there's some potential imminent threat of a release or exposure to the public, the EPA will just come in, we'll call them and say, does this meet your criteria? And then they'll come in and just do the cleanup. So they spent $700,000 on the South Bend Range site in part due to our involvement before we even went in there and assessed it. So there's a lot of different ways we can support with cleanup funding.
Great.
Yeah. And all of this program is voluntary site access, right? This isn't necessarily an enforcement measure or anything like that. This is all, working with property owners to get that access, to facilitate that access and be able to figure out what it takes to really redevelop these properties. And a lot of the funding that we've been able to get, usually like our assessment grant funding that we have, it does not have a local match to it. It is at 100%, and a lot of the other funds that have come in have been at 100% as well. And so
And then when we look at the redevelopment that's happened, it's about 15 to 1 for every dollar of the federal funding that we've put in. We've seen about $15 of that private investment in the property. So it's
Just from a fundamental standpoint, you take the mystery and uncertainty out of a property that's been sitting there forever, and you identify, what's going on. That's the catalyst to get things going. And you guys have done a yeoman's job with these programs last few years, helping especially smaller communities that don't have access to those funds. So, there was Commissioner talk how they support the increase, the value that MACOG provides is another example. Huge value that you all provide to our communities. I certainly appreciate it.
You mentioned Goshen, property was deed restricted for residential or against residential. What's the process to get that changed?
Right now, we're in a bit of a unique situation where the state just changed their standards and they changed how they evaluate sites. And the importance of soil gas has really increased in recent years. It used to be they were looking more at groundwater and assuming, well, that might cause a vapor issue. Now they're just looking directly at soil gas. So because they changed those standards, we can actually go back, look at the old data. Usually it does not include soil gas. Do more soil gas testing, demonstrate that it's safe for buildings. The groundwater isn't as important. So because of that change last year, that's a unique opportunity to relook at sites where you have a residential restriction. So it's not making the old data go away, but there's been a change in the regulatory scheme. That's why that's been possible. We're looking at that for the Roundhouse site and for some others as well. We look at sites.
So those restrictions for residential are by a state standard, not that a local unit of government has imposed that on.
Correct.
Okay. Great. Any other questions, comments? Not? Thank you, Leah. Next on staff updates today. There's no action or anything needed on that.
No action, just informational.
Plans and programs, regional safety action plan update, Caitlin?
Yeah. The board may recall earlier this year, we were awarded a discretionary grant through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program to complete a regional safety action plan. So within this past month, we finally have an executed agreement with USDOT. So we'll be kind of moving forward with this planning process. And our first step is to release RFP to get a consultant on board to kind of help us with the plan itself. And so I'm very much looking forward to this and kind of the benefit that will come from it for our communities. So wanted to give you a quick update on that.
What was the total that award?
500.
500,000.
I mean, that does require an 80-20 match, so we'll be at like 625. I want to say off the top of my head, total investment.
Great. But that will be a region-wide.
It will be region-wide, looking at transportation safety. So really trying to figure out from a region-wide perspective, the kind of ways to reduce fatal collisions and serious injury. Those will be the kind of primary focus, but low-cost countermeasures, overall kind of a regional snapshot of where there are those potentials for safety improvements. And then when that plan's done, it does unlock the potential for us to then, as a region or as individual municipalities or counties, apply to the Safe Streets for All implementation fund. That will be a highly subscribed, very competitive national pool. If we're successful and able to get funding for that, for kind of key projects, that'll be great. But even if we're not able to do that, I think it will set up opportunities for projects for either local funding with HSIP or those kind of things. We can still take a very systemic and systematic approach to improving safety region-wide.
So is it more geared around actual safety on vehicle traffic or pedestrian, bicycle?
It's all modes.
It's all modes.
Yep, it's all modes. So, we'll be looking at horse and buggy, bike, pedestrian, as well as vehicular, and everything included in that. And so there will probably be tiered strategies and those kind of things based on modes or, some potentials to use, say, the implementation program that we have for the tactical urbanism, where we can do some demonstrations of kind of maybe low-cost ways to do safety improvements in neighborhoods, all the way up to maybe larger corridor improvements. So
we've had a couple of fatalities in the last month or so in our community, so just definitely attuned to those needs. So thank you.
Additionally, I'm happy to announce that one of our region's core transportation planning documents. Michiana on the Move 2050 Transportation Plan is currently out for public comment through September. So there's a few printed copies here, and this isn't the complete document, but you can find the complete document online. So this is our high-level long-range plan that describes our transportation network, the needs and goals, and identifies programs, policies, and strategies, or programs, policies, and strategies, as well as projects over the next 2 decades to implement. So this is kind of a quick snapshot of the projects that have been identified, both road projects as well as active transportation projects. This plan is something that we update every 4 years in coordination kind of with state, local, federal partners, and it ensures that we evolve with the different changing demographics such as population trends, economic growth, as well as land use changes and community preferences. And so I wanted to highlight kind of why this plan is important. And MACOG is required to conduct the 3 C's. So continuing cooperative and coordinated comprehensive transportation planning process, which starts with the transportation plan kind of framework and goals. This often informs our activities that we do through our Unified Planning Work Program, and ultimately it makes our region eligible for federal transportation investment to improve and maintain our roadways, as well as active transportation infrastructure through our Transportation Improvement Program, which is the short-range component that our long-range plan funnels into. And so this plan is kind of built off of a year-long process of both public and stakeholder engagement, and will conclude with a final public comment period that will be open until October 9th. So we'll be seeking comments and feedback. We're also holding an open house on September 21st from 3 to 5 at the MACOG office, where staff will be there to answer any questions, and also just collect your feedback that you might have on the plan. The plan is located at move.macog.com. It's also been on our website, as well as sent out in our Gazette electronically. So hopefully you'll have a chance to access it that way, but feel free to also kind of look through the document that's printed off here.
And just a final note with that, obviously we'll wait on public comment, but on our draft schedule, it's our current plan that would be on the October 11th agenda, the MACOG Policy Board October 11th agenda for consideration for approval. So that's our current plan. Obviously, we'll see with public comment if there's anything that's substantive that we would need to reevaluate, but that is our current plan. So we will want to make sure that we have good attendance at the October meeting. So let us know if you're not able to attend, as that will be a key agenda item.
James, at the beginning of the meeting, you were talking a bit about how this correlates with the state transportation improvement plan. Thinking about US 31 and US 30 and their inclusion in this plan and their inclusion in the state plan, does one beget the other? Does one bolster the other? Does one increase the case for funding? If it's, how does that work?
Yeah, so we make sure in the narrative under the chapter that talks about the transportation network, we have a whole set of paragraphs on US 30, US 31, propel study, those kind of items. For our long range plan, though, we always ask the state for a listing of projects that they would like to include in the long range plan. However, the state of Indiana, as allowed by Federal Highway and US DOT, has a policy long range plan. They do not have a project specific long range plan. They used to many years ago when I first started had a project specific long range plan. Because the long range plan has to look out under federal law 20 to 25 years. I don't know that they felt confident in the listing of those projects that were in those farther out years. And so they scaled back to no longer having a project specific long range plan. So when we asked for a list of projects from the state, the only list that they're really able to give us is what is in the short-term plan, which is the STIP or the Transportation Improvement Program.
Right.
And so a lot of times when you look at our long-range plan, or you look at long-range plans kind of throughout the entire state of Indiana, they're really devoid and lacking when it comes to state projects, because the state does not know or will not say what their projects are after fiscal 28 in this case.
So let's cut to the chase.
Yeah.
There's a new governor coming in about a year and a half. And if they're not project specific, they can change those projects on a whim.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's always been our argument.
I don't think that's a question.
I'm just, yeah, that is the issue. And it also is disingenuous to the entire planning process, I feel like, and maybe I'm being too, no, well, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too much of a stalwart of appropriate, like, planning, but it feels silly that it's all a very connected transportation network. The projects that local governments do are going to affect state projects, and the projects that the state are going to do inform and affect the projects that local governments are going to do. And so it's a little silly to do a 20-year, 25-year plan that only looks at really the local projects, because you don't see how those local projects are going to impact positively, negatively state projects. But it is the system that we have. We have argued for a number of years that, hey, you know, the state has discretion here, that if they wanted to have a long-range plan, they could, because they know the projects, they could look at something like a 8-year cycle, which would essentially be 2 TIP cycles or 2 STIP cycles.
So STIP is 4.
Yeah, typically the STIP is for official. You can do a 5, but it's considered illustrative. So right now the state of Indiana does 5, but the feds have blinders and can't recognize the 5th year.
Yep.
So it's 24 to 28. Okay. And so you can have a 5th year, and that's fine. But like, if you're programming PE in 26, you know that you're going to do construction in 2030 or whatnot, like, right? Like we don't make investments on the front end and then not deliver those projects on the back end. So they might not have every project, but some other states, I haven't done a field scan recently, but I know some other states, like Pennsylvania was one of them, have a 7 to 8 year project specific long range plan. And then the rest of it is policy based, which is a little bit more, and look, like you update your long range plan or every 4 or 5 years, depending on air quality and where you fall on that. So like, if you're doing a 4 to 8 year long range plan as the state, you wouldn't be overcommitting yourself any more than what you're already doing in the tip.
Right.
Right.
Let's get the engineering started.
Yeah. So it's what we've always talked about with the planning team at INDOT, but those decisions happen way above my head. And so it really hasn't had traction in the last 5 to 8 years, but it's something that we as MPOs and councils of government kind of across the state are really passionate about, because it really doesn't make sense to have plan without any state projects in it. And so often there are very few. In this case, there might be 1 or 2 because we're aware of them, because they're ongoing, whether it's on US 20 or those investments out kind of east on US 20, or maybe some on US 33. But outside of those ones that are already started in the tip, we don't show anything else.
So in summary, our transportation improvement plan and the long range plan are project specific.
Yes.
But the state STIP is basically a 4 to 5 year project-specific plan. Everything beyond that is policy-driven.
Yes.
And this doesn't impact the locals' project-specific plans do not impact what the state does.
Yeah, like, I mean, for example, if we threw in a state project that the state didn't approve, right, into the long-range plan, then they're not going to sign off on that. Right. Like, so we can't force a state project in our long-range plan, but so that's where we often talk about the importance of it, say in a narrative. We've done it also for, say, US 31 northbound in Michigan, where it had previously stopped and trying to connect it to 94. Well, that's outside of our kind of purview, but it was a really important project. And so it was in the narrative section. And it has now been completed, but we wouldn't have a purpose to have listed that in the project section. But yeah, it's a frustrating kind of bureaucratic part of this process.
Even the projects in the 4-year STIP aren't necessarily sacred.
Correct.
With the new governor coming in.
Yeah, I mean, yes. There are always shifting priorities.
You didn't give me the answer I wanted.
I did tell you the truth.
But thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone. Any other questions for Caitlin? Otherwise, Dana?
Good morning.
Good morning.
The upcoming quarterly tracking meeting will take place on October 5th, which is a Thursday morning. All the quarterly tracking forms are due by the 22nd of this month. So please make sure to get those in time. The quarterly tracking and review email was sent out yesterday for all the information regarding the upcoming meeting. So just check the inbox for those details. But if there are any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to MACOG.
Those go to our private highway superintendents.
Yes.
Also, NDOT has announced an upcoming notice for funding availability for local rural federal aid projects, which opens on November 1st and will close November 30th. These funds are available for local public agencies who are interested in any type of new project, including bridge, road, safety sidewalk, or other projects that are eligible under the FAST Act. Applications will only be accepted through NDOT's ITAP, local call application from certified LPA employees in responsible charge. If you're interested in applying for a grant or need assistance, also don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Great. Thank you, Dana. Any questions? Not? Privilege of the floor. Anybody have anything else they'd like to have? Okay. Public comment, anything online or?
Not aware of any public comments online. And we're not seeing any in person.
Good. That'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Everyone.